Monsters versus aliens. That's right, folks. This is kicking off a little bit of a mini series here in Movie Tales as we go through the 50-Foot Woman series. We're going to do Tall Ladies Wreaking Havoc for a minute because Tim Burton's rebooting that property, and I'm like, let's look back, the ones that be. We'll start with the newest iteration, and we'll go down. And there are other iterations of a woman getting tall, but these are the ones that are specifically about the attack of the 50-foot woman. Because that's what we're ripping on here. This is a DreamWorks movie, which is already like something, I don't know if we've touched upon a DreamWorks movie yet when we've done these. We've talked about Disney and Miyazaki. I have a very interesting relationship with DreamWorks because I don't think I love any of their films solely, but I will never explicitly say they make a bad movie. This is in an era where they're kind of coming off a lot of highs, and they're like, well, we need to do like a sci-fi genre thing. And then it's like, you have 5 credited screenwriters, so it stops being like this really interesting like children's science fiction and becomes more like a parody of science fiction itself, using like the characters and tropes of the genre. And that's kind of interesting. But it's also in like the late 2000s, so the animation looks bad. This just straight up looks bad. All of the characters that are not main characters, they look really bad, and they don't look like there was any money put into them to make them look good. And that's fine, I guess, but they're all similar. They all got like big heads and stupid aesthetics, and it can get really frustrating because you're like, this should look better. Why doesn't it look better? I've seen movies from DreamWorks in this time look better, but this one just doesn't. But that's all fine and dandy because it is ripping on classic science fiction, which is my bread and butter. I love classic science fiction. I love most of the things that this is ripping on, and that's really cool. This is about Susan Murphy, played by Reese Witherspoon. She's about to get married, and at her wedding, literally the day of her wedding, a big meteorite crashes into like the area of the wedding, into like a field, and it hits her. And as they're at the ceremony, she just starts to grow into a 50-foot woman. And you're like, that's a fun premise. I like that when we are doing animation. That's a fun thing to play with. I like that a lot. And that opens up the first big problem I have with this, which is Derek, her to-be husband, her boyfriend, who he's written and supposed to be a jerk. It's way too effective because you're just like, you know this guy, you know someone that only cares about their career, doesn't care about other people's happiness, and thinks that this girl could just go along for the journey. You know this guy too well. I hate that it's Paul Rudd doing the voice, just because, and this could be something that's controversial, I don't know, Paul Rudd's not a very good voice actor. He is either too over the top, or he doesn't do anything. And because it's all about like his facial expressions, you want to see that, but when it's just his voice, it's not really working. But Reese, on the other hand, she's a phenomenal voice actress because she has that quiet little drawl to things. She knows how to like let words stretch out, how to make it sound interesting, change her voice depending on the sequence to make it for animation. She does really good. And I think the rest of the supporting voice cast does really good as well. So the government shows up and they take Susan, and she gets put into like a facility, the ant farm, whatever you want to call it. It's just bunkers beyond bunkers of just hidden deep within the military where they keep the monsters. Led by W.R. Monger. Warren Monger himself leads this facility with Kiefer Sutherland doing the perfect voice. This is phenomenal because it's so distinctively Kiefer Sutherland's voice, but he's putting a little too much like military drawl onto it, and you're like, this is perfect. The perfect voice cast for Warren Monger is this guy. Oh, I love it. And then we are introduced to the rest of our classic science fiction creatures. We have the 50-foot woman. We have the fly. I mean, Dr. Cockroach, and it's Hugh Laurie, and it's perfect. He's just like a little scatterbug that crawls in everything. He eats garbage. It's hilarious and fun. You have Will Arnett doing The Missing Link, which is fantastic. The Missing Link is such one of those like classic concepts that could be in anything. This guy's just kind of like, he shows up to a beach, terrorizes the locals, wants to get with the ladies, and he's just like a freaky fish guy who's out of shape. You have Bob, who is Blob, and it's just Seth Rogen doing a great impression of himself. It's really fantastic. And Insectosaurus, probably the one that you could be like, oh, it's a nuclear tested dinosaur Godzilla thing. Yeah. Like, those are all. The Fly, The Blob, The Missing Link, Godzilla, The 50-Foot Woman. Those are all classic science fiction stuff. It's all really cool. And if you haven't seen any of like those original films, there is something to explore in all of them. 50-Foot Woman has really good like use of like, sets, like showing how tall she is. Same with Godzilla in that aspect too. The Blob was a really interesting movie, just showing you like, here's a weird creature thing. But putting them all together in a movie, it's kind of a fun idea. In a kid's movie too, it's a fun idea. And then they're just like hidden from the world, but then a big robot shows up because Galactic, this like weird alien, wants to find like the quantonium so he can rebuild his planet. And he's like an evil guy, and it's inside of Susan. So we have, well, I'll say this, like the best scenes in the movie are the ones about the monsters, and it's focusing on like the bureaucracy of the government. The first sequence when Stephen Colbert's president shows up, which is a really good choice because Colbert, another really good voice actor who just knows how to play to his strength as a voice actor. He shows up, does Axel F on a keyboard to this big robot, and it smashes the keyboard, and then it's like, okay, war room time. How do we deal with this thing? We have two big buttons next to each other. Nukes all launch, makes me an espresso. Which one do I hit? I don't know. And that is when Warren Monger's like, well, I got a solution, Mr. President. It's called releasing the monsters I've been kidnapping. Which goes into a really funny bit of a woman who is constantly screaming every time they reveal a new monster. It's funny, and it works. You're like, those are the best sequences in this movie, where it's like ripping on like how the government and like military reacts to like these monsters. It's so much fun. And then it's just, we have to send our people out to go fight a big robot. It doesn't work perfectly. Susan kind of does all the work. And she's just like, well, that sucked. I'm going to go see Derek again and go home. But you can't be normal because you're a monster. It's a lesson about accepting who you are. Blah, blah, blah. You get it. You've seen it a million times. It works. And I like all of that. Where this movie really starts to lose me is the last half, where it becomes, we're stopping an alien invasion, which I know that's the name of the movie. We're stopping an alien invasion. But it's just so much more interesting when it's just, here are these monsters that have to live together, and they want to defend the earth and protect it, but they're not accepted, and they have to be each other's family. That's more interesting than, let's do an extended sequence where we're on the spaceship and we're going to sneak in and infiltrate and like release Susan and save her, and then we have to like stop it from exploding and killing all these things, like blah, blah, blah. That gets so repetitive and annoying, and it doesn't add to the joy that's coming from this movie. When it is working is when it is ripping on classic science fiction. Not when it's becoming like this big blockbuster where we're on a spaceship destroying clones, but when it's like, the government is against these people, but we have to use them. The world's terrified of them. Susan is like this huge, big woman. That's when it's working. I do love a big woman. I do. It's one of my favorite tropes. It's why Giganta is my favorite Wonder Woman villain. And they call her Ginormica in this, which is like a great parody. It's like, yeah, that name works for like doing a big character like this, because no one else is going to use it for that. I like that a lot. So the big fight scene at the end, I don't particularly love it. The better stuff is when they're like at Susan's parents' house and the monsters are like terrorizing everything just existing. That's all better than like the latter half, but I get what we're doing here. Insectosaurus dies but is actually wrapped in a cocoon and like emerges as like a butterfly, and then they're accepted by the world because they saved them. I guess that lesson is okay. You could have handled it a little bit better so people would be more like accepting with, despite their flaws, but because they saved the world they get accepted. It's kind of loose in that sense, but now they're a team. They're going to go on another mission to save the world from a giant snail. Look, I get it. I know what we're doing here. It's for kids. And there's enough like really smart jokes in here that work for me. I like all of the stuff where Bob doesn't remember his own backstory. So he's just like, yes, and when we're done here, I'm going to go back to my experiments. And Cockroach is like, no, that's my thing. Right, I'm going to go back and be with Derek. It's like, no, that's for Susan. That's really funny. And when he meets Derek, he's like, I met somebody better than you. It's good. It's really funny. And I do think the designs are iconic enough. You know, I don't know how you would make a 50-foot woman more iconic, right? But you did it. Her hair is white. It's Reese Witherspoon, so that works. Blue blobby thing, it works like all the designs. They are iconic and make sense. It's just a shame that everything doesn't really come together in the end. And some of like the easy jokes about like a spaceship self-destructing defeat it from being anything more than just like, oh yeah, memorable fun for a summer. It's a shame that becomes the case. Because I do like this movie. I like the concept, and I think it could be something special. Maybe if we were to attempt like another one today, we'd do things differently, and it'd be more, not mature, but handled with different intellect. But also, 5 people wrote this, so I don't really know what to expect from that. You know, when you want to homage classic sci-fi, you homage it. You don't need to put in the other stuff. Just make the parody of it, as opposed to modernizing the stuff with these characters. That's where it works. But Stephen Colbert, fantastic in this. Kiefer Sutherland, fantastic in this. Monsters vs. Aliens, an okay movie. And that is going to do it for this episode of Galactic Tales. Now, thank you all for watching this video. Be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. As always, you can check me out on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. And of course, I will catch you in the next one. Have fun. Stay safe. Good luck.